Hey guys, and welcome back to Talking Halo. First thing on the docket that we're going to talk about today is this crappy mic that's on my head. Somebody mentioned it to me last video and the video before that. I understand that the mic is not the best and the camera is not the best quality. I have some stuff coming in the mail that should be here probably next week or the week after, depending on how long it takes. I'm not sure. And then the video quality will get so much better. Now that we got that out of the way, the first thing that we're going to talk about in retrospects to Halo is self-branding. I'm gonna pull up a picture, and you guys are gonna be able to tell me if you recognize anything on this picture. Bam! You probably recognize every single team that's on here. And why do you recognize every single team on here? Because the organizations branded themselves and got their name out there as best as they possibly could in any way possible. Now, back in the day when we had MLG and Halo, they did all the branding for us. A lot of the logos that you saw in that picture were and still are copywritten by MLG. They understood that to get fans of the players, they needed to brand the players. So they made these logos, they made these teams, and they gave them to whoever needed one. And that's how they made rivalries. You think Final Boss versus Carbon. You think Instinct probably versus Final Boss again. You think Triggers Down versus Straight Rippin'. You understand that these brands and you associate these brands with certain players. You think Final Boss, you think Walshy or Ogre 2, you think Straight Rippin', you think T Squared, you think Triggers Down, you probably think Hysteria. It is what it is. And currently, right now, you think Optic, you probably think Lethal right off the top of your head, or Envy, you probably think Snipe Down or Pistola right off the top of your head, because these are good players and these are well-known organizations, and you mix them together, you have a branded player. And the problem that I see nowadays is that players don't want to brand themselves. They think that if they join an organization that they'll be set. What happens if you get dropped from the team? What happens if the organization closes its doors? What happens if Halo just drops off the map altogether? You need to be able to transition from a professional player into a creator or a marketer or a name in the esports industry. And the reason this came to my head was I saw Ace on Twitter. He plays in Straight Rippin', Elam Ace. Aaron Elam, I'm sorry, I said his name wrong. And he made a logo. It's like this A looking thing, and he put it on shirts. He's opening up his own store. And that's great. That's a great thing to happen. And more players need this to happen. They need to brand themselves. Two great examples right at the top of my head that don't even have to relate from Halo going into working for 343. You have Scott Gandhi, Scott Lucier Gandhi. He started Halo 1, Halo 2, played in Halo 3. When he felt like he couldn't compete anymore, he asked Plucky, he's like, yo, can I cast? And they took him up on the opportunity. And some of the funniest things I've ever seen came from Gandhi and Puckett casting, or Gandhi and Shockwave casting. Probably the funniest events that I've ever been to was because of those guys. They have very good personalities, and they transitioned well from being a professional player into a caster. But you can't always hope for that. You can't always hope that if you go from pro player that you can go to be a caster. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. And he didn't. He took advantage of the opportunity, became a caster while the scene was still big, and networked. And then when the scene died down a little bit, he transitioned into YouTube. And after YouTube and him expressing his thoughts and explaining and sharing his knowledge, he got a job working at High Rise or High Res. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. And he works in Smite now. Another example is alumni warrior Marcus. He transitioned from a player, got his name out, started going to events, started networking, and now he works for various different organizations within the esports, not necessarily as a pro player, but as somebody who understands the scene and markets the scene. I think he worked for Astro Gaming for a little while, and I'm not 100% sure who he's working for currently, but I know that he works in the scene. And that's a big thing that I want you guys to understand, that just because you join an organization doesn't mean that you can just rest on your laurels. Look at Optic right now, one of the biggest brands in FPS. And I don't think any of the current members actually do too much on branding themselves. Now, before them, Maniac and Flamesword are doing fine now. They went out of their way to brand themselves. They do YouTube, they do streaming, they post on Twitter all the time, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat. They're doing everything they can to further their career with the fan base they acquired while they were a professional player. And that's what everyone needs to do. go on Twitter. I'm pretty you can find an abundance of people that will make you a logo for either cheap or nothing at all. And then transition that logo into everything that you're doing. Put that logo on everything. That logo needs to be every time your name is there, that logo needs to be there. So when they see that logo, they associate it with you. And then your fan base will understand that this logo means this person and this person does these things. And it is what it is. That's what you have to do because you cannot be a pro player forever. Yes, there are people in other titles like Counter Strike that are 30 plus years old still competing on the top of the game. But that's not going to be everybody. That is very few people, honest with you. So you can't hope for that. There are people that were in the esports scene as pro players, then they can't get on a pro team anymore, or they're not as good as the next title that came out. They just kind of disappear into obscurity. There are plenty of names that I can name off that I have no idea where they're nowhere in this scene. They probably became an adult and got their own job in the real world and moved on with their life. But if you want to make it in this scene, you need to brand yourself. I read an article the other day, probably not the other day, probably a couple weeks ago, and it said that 95% of the money that comes into esports is from sponsors. Is from companies approaching organizations because they have fan bases. And that's what you have to do. If you're a professional player and you join an organization and you have your own brand, that's great. You can mix your brand with their brand, and then possibly if you ever leave that organization, you can bring some of the fans with you. And this goes to every sport. You look at Messi, he's the European soccer player, football player for anybody in Europe. And whatever team he goes to, people follow him because he is good at what he does. And outside of the game, he does everything he can to brand himself. He does charity events, he does interviews, he does TV shootings, he travels across to all different countries to do autograph signing, to do anything he possibly can to help his brand. Because companies will value your brand more than your skill. They'll An example are there's teams that are top 8, top 12 that have full funding because they either have a really good talking skills, they have a really good set of skills outside of being a pro player, or they have their own brand. Like I can't even tell you the last event Ninja won, which actually I probably could. It's probably like a Halo 4 event, and organizations still come to him because he has the best branding in Halo right now. He's probably the number one Halo streamer. He's probably the number one Halo personality. And if you guys have followed him for a while, you've seen all the things that his fan base has helped him do. He went to that Bud Light All Stars thing. He's joined multiple organizations. He's gone to multiple conventions for organizations. He's done so many things and earned so much money because he built himself a fan base. And that's what you guys need to do. If you're in an esport and you don't think that you're gonna last very long, or you don't think that you'll ever win, or you don't think that you'll make a career out of it, use the time you're in there to build yourself a brand. And a lot of times, if you join an organization, they have artists that will help you brand yourself, like Optic Gaming. Flamesword just got a new logo. I know that Hex is working on his own branding, and there's Crim6 has his own thing. Scump has his own thing. Karma's working on his own thing. I mean, what you need to do. You need to brand yourself, and organizations will understand that because the bigger your brand is, the bigger of an asset you are to that company, to that organization. The more money they'll bring in, and then the more money that you'll earn. And if by happenstance you leave the organization, you'll have something to fall back on. And that's where I'm going to end the video today, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I will do my best to answer all of them. My Twitter is also down below. If you have anything that you need to get an answer to immediately, or need any suggestions, I know a lot of graphics artists. If anybody wants to reach out and get yourself a logo. But again, this is a conversation. If you guys have a different opinion than me, leave them down below. We'll have a conversation about it. And hopefully next video, I'll see you guys there.